it's Angel Vane, and this is episode 91 of my author's diary. I am an author of crime thrillers for women, and every week I take you through the ups and downs that I go through as I try to write and publish new books. So don't forget to subscribe or follow me if you haven't done so already. So this week, I have finished going through all of the comments that I received from my editor, and this is probably the best round of I didn't screw something up in my book that I've done ever, which, I would expect that now because it's okay, well, this is the fourth book that I've written, and I would hope that I'm improving, because if every time I'm turning something in, it's like garbage and stuff has to be overhauled, that would be a big problem, right? And so as I was finishing up the revisions to kind of respond to some of the comments from the editor really struck me as being around areas that I actually have no personal experience with. And it got me to thinking about that common writing advice that you always hear about, that you should write what you know. And then typically when you see that advice kind of, across the internet and people talking about it, then it's immediately followed up with, "No, that's stupid advice. Don't do that." Write what you don't know, right? And so I thought, okay, well, let me think about, what do I think about that question? Should I write what I know? Should you write what you know? So I think that when you start trying to unpack that question, it really hinges on, how do you define know? And I think a lot of times, especially people who are very quick to kind of throw that out as useless advice, don't even think about doing that. Sometimes it's because they're taking a very literal interpretation of writing what you know, as in only write about things that you have personally done or personally have experience with. And if that's the advice, if that's really the crux of what that advice is, then I completely disagree with that. So that literal interpretation of write what you know is going to be a big time problem for me, because when I look back on my life so far, going all the way back, she kind of lived a little bit of a boring life, right? I don't have a lot of exciting stories and different things like that of my experiences. I'm kind of the straight-laced, kind of dull one of the friends and family. So writing what I know is nowhere near as exciting as the stuff that I actually put into my book. And then if I think about, okay, well, some people would say, okay, there are aspects of my day job that get very interesting because, I have access to confidential information and things like that. And I see the inner workings of businesses. And that could make for a riveting novel. But you know what? I don't want to write about that. I'm trying to escape that. That's my reality. I don't want to write about my reality. I want to write about something that is new and different to me. And so, when I think about the things that I write, if I have to write what I know, okay, so I write about an art conservator. I love art. I love going to museums. I know really nothing about conserving the work of art. I write about a Navy SEAL. Have never been in the military. Definitely have never been SEAL caliber to really know what they do and really know from personal experience. I also write about crazy diabolical murderers and killers and cartel leaders and criminals and racketeers and people who do just really bad things. So does that mean I need to go out and be a criminal before I write about a criminal? Do I have to go out and murder somebody before I write a scene about killing somebody? No. That's foolishness. No. Then I start to think about, okay, well, what about other genres? People who write sci-fi and futuristic stuff. There's no way they can know that stuff. They're not in the future. When you think about a time travel novel, did they literally time travel and literally experience this stuff? Of course not. So I don't think that we really should be taking a literal type of interpretation to what you know. I think that when you start looking at that advice, it is actually good advice because it takes a much broader interpretation of what you know. And I think that there's different aspects of defining what you know. So now let me segue to what I think that writing advice is really about. So the first aspect that I think is really, really critical, and I think really writers should do this, is surround the emotional aspect. So when you think about the emotions that you've experienced throughout your life and how those same emotions may relate to different types of experiences, but yet you can tap into those emotions because you felt that way before. Like, I know how it feels to be disappointed. I know how it feels to sit there and just feel like, I cannot believe this is happening. Like Game 7 of Houston Rockets versus the Golden State Warriors when we were up, when Chris Paul used to be on our team and we were up. All we had to do was win one game, and we had 2 games to win that one game. And then to sit in that stadium and watch that team completely fall apart and not win either one of those games, like, I know what that feels like. And I can tap into that for a completely different experience, right? So I can have somebody go through something that's probably like a real true trauma, but tap into that emotion, that feeling that I had in my gut, that disgust, that just utter disappointment, and really tap into that and bring that element very truthfully to a story, even though I experienced those emotions in a different way. And so I think from the emotional aspect of things, you absolutely should write what you know, because we've all experienced the gamut of emotions. And then the next thing you have to think about is, well, how do you know it, right? So again, a literal interpretation is, oh, I have experienced it, I have literally done it. But there are so many different ways that you come to know certain things. You can know things from your personal experiences, but you can also know things from research, and you can know things from experiences of others, your friends, your family. You can know things from other entertainment, from watching movies and television and listening to music. You can know things from watching the news. And so there's so many different ways that you can come to know something that gets beyond your own personal experience, and that all counts in the knowing. If you ask me, like, I really believe that counts in the knowing. And so when you're talking about, okay, well, write what you know, if I'm broadly defining it and including all of that stuff under the umbrella, I have no problem with saying that advice is good advice. And then the next thing I start to think about is, okay, what about your imagination? Now, that area for each one of us, like, I know my own imagination inside and out. I am the ultimate expert of my own imagination. And just because it's not tangible and real does not mean it's not something that I know and that I can apply to the stories that I write. So really capturing how much you own and know your imagination also needs to be incorporated in that definition of what knowing means with that writing advice. Yeah, and it makes me think about, like, when I was a kid, growing up, we used to spend so much time on Channel 8 in Houston, which is PBS. And so we would watch all of the different PBS shows, from Sesame Street to 3-2-1 Contact to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And one of the things that I love the most about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is when we went to the land of make-believe, because it was limitless, right? It was whatever you could think of in your head. And guess what? Those thoughts, that fantasy, that imagination, that's stuff that you know. And that knowing you can bring to a page, and that absolutely counts, I think, in writing what you know. And then the last thing I've heard some people say when they start to consider the writing what you know advice, it's not just writing what you know, but it's writing in order to know. And so it's about what you discover about your thoughts, your feelings, your perspectives as you start down a pathway of writing about something that you don't know. And so you are discovering things about yourself and things that you may not have realized that you knew along that process. And that is also part of writing what you know. So after all of that, my answer to should you write what you know? Yes and no. And I hope that you understand why it's both answers based off of everything that I covered today. So if you want to continue to keep up with me and all the ups and downs that I go through as I try to write and publish new books, click the subscribe button. Then don't forget to click that little silver bell so you won't miss when I'm doing a video. And I will see you next time.